Going on, everybody? David Elliott here, and in today's video we're going to be doing a part 1 of 2 video series where we're going to do a live example of pre-underwriting a potential hybrid deal brought to us from PropStream. And in the second video we're going to look at what it takes to do a full underwriting on that exact same property. So let's begin. We're going to pull up the property address right now. It is currently listed on market on Zillow for $363,000. According to the rental estimate by Zillow, we're projecting about $2,000 a month on the rental projections, which is quite significant. It tells us that this is a strong rental market, and we could expect about $100 per 100 square feet of livable space that the property has. Now, although Zillow says $2,000 on average for a property of this size, we're going to be slightly pessimistic, and we're going to say $1,900 a month on the rental projection. So we're going to throw in $363,000 purchase price and our rental estimate of $1,900 into our pre-underwriting calculator. So let's throw that in. $363, $1,900 on the rent projection. This side will update and fluctuate as we fill in the rest of the calculator. Now we're going to be looking at the best case scenario that the seller could receive from a conventional offer, and in that case it would be a full ask price of $363,000. We're going to include a best case scenario in terms of the sales fee, which is going to be 4%, 3% on the listing side commission, 0% commission on the buyer side, and 1% towards closing costs, totaling 4% sales fee, best case scenario that the seller could possibly, undertake. And we're going to be now pulling up the encumbrance that PropStream had shown us earlier. And according to PropStream, we're looking at a total encumbrance of about $287,000. There are no liens associated with the property, just one mortgage note. So we're going to put in $287,000 for the total encumbrance. Now we could expect that the seller is going to walk away at closing with roughly $60,000 at closing. They are going to have to pay capital gains to Uncle Sam, which in this case would be about 15%. That is the most common capital gains that sellers will have to pay. Every now and then, sellers will have to pay 20% capital gains, but that is subject to their tax bracket. So we're now going to include the agent commission of 3%, which was the best case scenario. And in a matter of seconds, we have filled in all of the offer details and details that the seller would most likely be looking at from a conventional point of view. Now we're going to compare this to our creative terms. Now for creative, being that this is a hybrid deal, we're going to want to incentivize the seller. And so in order to incentivize the seller, we're going to purchase the property over their current ask price. However, I'm going to set a cap limit. I'm going to set a cap limit not to exceed 10% of their current ask price, meaning that I can offer the seller $37,000 over their current ask price, and I will purchase their property at $400,000 subject to terms. Now, in terms of a sales fee, we're still going to look at best case scenario for sales fee, which would be 3% on the listing side commission, because we're going to go direct to the listing agent and avoid the buyer side of the commission. And it'll be 0.7 towards closing costs, as closing costs for a creative transaction will always be slightly less than a traditional method. So 3.7 would be the total sales fee. We're going to include a down payment of 10% just to start off with, which would be $40,000. The seller will walk away at closing with roughly $25,000 at closing, significantly less than that of the amount to be received through a conventional offer. However, we are paying them $37,000 over asking price. So if we wanted to incentivize the seller ever so slightly, we could actually probably come up on that down payment to, let's say, $45,000 just so we could hit the $30,000 mark that the seller would be receiving at closing. And now we're not exactly closing the gap, but the seller would be receiving half of their money up front, and they would be making an additional $37,000 on the back end for a hybrid transaction. There is no capital gains on a creative term such as this because there's a lot of gross equity and forced equity that we have now put into the property. Forced equity meaning that we have paid the seller. We have agreed to pay the seller $37,000 over ask price. That is your forced equity. So we have a total seller carryback of $68,000. Until this $68,000 is received to the seller, then the seller gets to, by IRS tax code, defer their capital gains. If you are working on market, and this happens to be an on-market property that we are looking at, you can then illustrate to the agent with a quick little snapshot, such as something like this, and you could convey to the agent that if they were to present your creative terms, they'd be looking at a total commission of $12,000 as opposed to just under $11,000 simply by presenting and getting their client to agree to creative terms. So a huge benefit there, where you can not only present all of the offer details that the seller could receive through your method versus a conventional method, but you'd also be incentivizing the agent to work with you. So now we've got pretty much in a matter of seconds, we've calculated all the necessary components to doing a full underwriting. We're going to take a quick look here on the right-hand side. We were pessimistic as before, and because we were being pessimistic, we said that $1,900 on the rental estimate is what we could expect. We're looking at a total entry fee of a little over 12%. We're looking at a cash-on-cash worst case scenario of under 7% cash on cash, worst case scenario, and our net cash on cash flow, say that one more time, we're looking a little over $250 a month. We're looking at about $275. So that would be net in our pocket. These two criteria here are worst case scenarios. So as long as this value here is over $250 a month on net after expenses, you have a deal. This must be above $250. If it's not, then you do not have a deal, and you may want to come and revisit this property at a later point in time. Perhaps the seller then will drop their asking price. Let's say their seller drops it by, $30,000. So let's list this at $363,000. We'll then change this to $363,000. Okay. So if the seller were to drop their current ask price, I'm sorry, I think it's already listed $363,000, is it not? It is. Let's drop it by $30,000, which would be $333,000. There we go. Okay. Now we can see that our entry fee has dropped. Our down payment to the seller is higher than 12%, so we're going to lower this. We're going to see if hypothetically we could get these numbers to look any different. We're going to give the seller $40,000 up front as opposed to $45,000. And by doing so, we've really narrowed in on the amount of money to be received at closing from the seller's point of view. Seller's going to be walking away, best case scenario, at $32,000. On creative, they're going to be walking away with $26,000. So this is fantastic. In a situation like this, you could do a follow-up with the seller and wait for them to come down on price by, let's say, $30,000. If you did that, now you've really incentivized them in terms of the money being received at closing, because you're getting significantly close to what they would get through a traditional method. Plus, your total entry fee has come down, your cash on cash percentage has gone up, and your net cash on cash has also gone up ever so slightly. The bottom line is if this number here is above 250, you have a deal. The question is the seller willing to accept your terms? And in a situation like this, where we were looking at a Class C property, being that it was a Class C property, we probably want to follow up with the seller and wait for them to come down $30,000. When they do come down $30,000 on their current ask price, we certainly would have a deal. We do have a deal at their current ask price of $363,000. So we go back, we certainly do have a deal at $363,000. However, is it a deal that the seller is willing to accept? Maybe. It might be. It depends on the type of negotiation and talk that you have with the listing agent and with the seller over the phone. But being that we're over the $250 net cash flow, you have a deal as a buyer, as an investor. It's just a matter of incentivizing the seller to go along with a creative offer versus conventional. Okay, this wraps up the pre-underwriting portion of a part 1 of 2 videos. So in a matter of seconds, we're able to figure out whether or not we have a lead that we want to pursue, whether it's going to cash flow the way that we want it to, and now it would simply be a conversation that you're going to have to follow up with the seller and with the agent, and kind of just convince them to let's go an untraditional route and let me present them a creative offer versus a traditional offer. And being in this case, if we can come up to or get close to or even outcompete what they would receive through a traditional method such as this, we're really not that far away in terms of money being received at closing. They would be receiving quite a bit of money on the back end. So this is a conversation that you would want to have with the agent. You're able to make all these decisions within a minute or less. And so that is the benefit of doing some pre-underwriting on your property as opposed to a full underwriting. And in the next video, we're going to look at what it takes to do a full underwriting and why I highly suggest you only do a full underwriting when you have received a yes from the seller, because it is time consuming. So this concludes part 1 of 2. I'll see you on the next video.